So good afternoon, everyone, and I'm really happy on behalf of the organizing committee of Atal Faculty Development Program on Synthetic Biology, and on behalf of Madurai Kamaraj University, I'm really proud to welcome Dr. Kalpana Luthra, Professor, Department of Biochemistry, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. Madam really obtained her master's from University of Mumbai, and subsequently she did her PhD in Biochemistry Department, All India Institute of Medical Sciences in the year 1994. So Madam has huge credits, many number of honors and awards. To name a few, Sakuntala Amir Chand Prize awarded by ICMR for the year 2003, Fogarty Fellowship in the year 2002 for a short-term training at New York University School of Medicine. She is a recipient of FAIMER, that is Foundation of Advanced International Medical Education Research Fellowship in the year 2006. And she got several awards, AIMS Excellence Research Award in the year 2019 for basic research, and AIMS Excellence Research Award in the year 2019 for basic research, third prize, and AIMS Excellence Award in the year 2013 for basic science, the second prize, and during 19 she got first prize. So in that way, the list of awards and merits she really got is very many. And to her credit, as an example for all the younger generation students, the madam has cleared UGC NET at the time when she cleared in the year 1988. It is UGC CSIR combined examination. She has cleared for life sciences junior research fellowships. It's highly prestigious. So madam really entered into the PhD after obtaining after cleared her UGC CSIR combined joint entrance examination. And to her credit, all these years she has published more than 115 publications in highly reputed international journals in biochemistry and immunology area. And for her real achievements, she awarded patents in the name of neutralizing human anti-V3 monoclonal antibody generated from HIV-1 clade 3 infected Indian patient, and in the year 2014. And another one, a broadly neutralizing antibody in the year 2018. So the both topics, or both of these inventions are really very important in the context of a pandemic. We are talking hugely about neutralizing antibodies and related things. Madam is constantly working on these areas. So definitely the talk by Kalpana Madam is going to be beneficial to all the audience, all the participants. And being an immunologist and associated with the Indian Immunology Society for a long time, Kalpana Madam's contribution is rich for the Indian Immunology Society, and I'm being close associate for the last 2 decades with the Indian Immunology Society team, and also the researchers in All India Institute of Medical Sciences. I know the contribution of Kalpana Madam. So on behalf of the organizing committee and on behalf of the Atal FDP program organizing committee, and on behalf of the participants, I welcome you, Madam, to deliver a talk on the engineered antibodies as a therapeutic tool to enrich the knowledge for the participants. With this, I now invite Madam to deliver her talk. Madam, please.
And to begin with, I wish to thank Dr. Balakrishnan for inviting me to be a speaker in this on faculty development program organized by the Madurai Kamaraj University. So quickly to come to my topic, that engineered antibodies act as a therapeutic tool and a synthetic biological perspective from this point of view. So I will go from the very basics, and if there is any doubt, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions so that the discussion is interactive. So, going to the very basics from the antibody structure, all of you are aware that the immunoglobulin molecule is a Y-shaped structure with two identical heavy chains and two identical light chains linked by disulfide linkages. And the immunoglobulin molecule or the antibody molecule is a folded structure. The antibody individual chain subunits are folded into immunoglobulin domains, which form beta pleated sheets. And there are a total of 12 domains. Like you can see that there are 4 domains, 2 of the heavy and 2 of the light chains in the variable region of the antibody. And on both the chains together, it is 4 domains. And you have the FC portion, which is the fragment crystallizable, which has again the domains of the heavy and the light chain. So you have 4 domains here. So you can see that the antibody domains which interact with the antigen are known as the FAB, that is the fragment antibody binding region of the antibody. So these are the FAB domains, and this is the FC region, that is a fragment crystallizable, which has a number of effector functions. So we'll come to these later. So you can see that any antibody, recently you must have heard a lot about the plasma therapy in COVID-19 and how the plasma antibodies which have neutralizing activity are more effective for this therapy. So what do we understand by neutralizing antibodies? So those antibodies which can bind to the pathogen, like here the example is out of an HIV virus, and the Y-shaped antibody is blue in structure. So if the antibody is able to bind to the pathogen and prevent it from infecting another cell, then such an antibody is known as a neutralizing antibody. Whereas there are some other antibodies also generated in the plasma of the infected individuals. Those antibodies bind to the pathogen but are not able to prevent the pathogen from infecting the cell. So such antibodies are non-neutralizing. However, it is not that the non-neutralizing antibodies have absolutely no use and they are not redundant in the immune system. So the advantage of these non-neutralizing antibodies is that unlike the neutralizing antibodies, although they cannot immediately prevent the pathogen from infecting another cell, these non-neutralizing antibodies can help in opsonization of the pathogen. So what do we mean by opsonization? That these pathogens can be coated by the antibody which binds via the FAB domain, and the opsonized pathogen is more easily susceptible for phagocytosis by effector immune cells such as the macrophages and the natural killer cells. So these antibodies, although they are non-neutralizing, along with the neutralizing antibodies, they can bind, and via their FC receptors, this is the FC portion, and the effector cells, you can see they have FC receptors. So I hope all of you are able to see the region that I'm pointing on the slide. Can anyone of you respond? Okay, so I see Dr. Subkumar saying that you can see it. So you have FC receptors on the effector cells, which basically bind to the FC portion of the antibody, which in turn has opsonized the pathogen, and this promotes the phagocytosis of the entire pathogen, that is the antigen antibody complex inside the effector cells, and leads to killing of the pathogen. Again, the effector functions of these such antibodies are different. So what are the various effector functions that it promotes? Phagocytosis. The other is by promoting phagocytosis, these antibodies help the activated effector cells to release certain soluble factors such as chemokines or cytokines, and also in addition to promote antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity. So I hope all of you are aware of this function. What is ADCC activity? So basically, whenever an antigen which is bound by an antibody and it is phagocytosed by the effector cells such as macrophages, these macrophages can lead to release of granzymes and perforins So basically here, if it is not phagocytosed, if the infected cell is very large, then the antibody-coated pathogen, pathogen cell is killed because of the release of toxic granules such as porphyrins and granzymes, which are nothing but proteolytic enzymes, which lead to digestion of the infected cell and thereby killing, known as antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity of the virus-infected cells. So either the virus itself is phagocytosed, or if there is an intracellular pathogen, that is such as a virus or a bacterial infected cell, the whole cell can be killed by effector cells such as macrophages by ADCC activity. So these are the various effector functions of an antibody. Either it can be neutralizing or it can be a non-neutralizing antibody. If it is a non-neutralizing antibody, then it has the effector functions such as phagocytosis, activation of ADCC activity, and activation of the effector cells to release certain soluble chemokines and cytokines, that is the immunostimulatory mechanism. So you must have heard of that. So now we come to the antibodies, that because they are so important for immunotherapy, not only for immunotherapy in infectious diseases, but also for targeting tumor cells, tumor antigens, right? So you must have heard of the CAR T cells and a number of applications of such kind of antibodies. So the different technology to produce antibody, the most traditional technology is a hybridoma technology. All of you would be aware, wherein you need first an animal which is immunized, such as a mouse. So basically, any antigen which is injected into the mouse and elicits an antibody response in that mouse, right? So these antibodies are produced by the B cells in the mouse, which are activated by that antigen. So antigen-specific B cells get activated. What you do is the spleen of such a, you sacrifice the mouse after immunization and take the spleen, take out the spleen, which is basically rich in B cells, activated B cells. And then these B cells, once they are purified, they are fused with myeloma cells. So myeloma cells are basically immortalized cells, tumor cells. And when you fuse the myeloma cell with the P cell, antigen activated P cell, then this leads to formation of a hybrid cell, which is known as a hybridoma. So once you screen for the positive hybridoma cells, and then you clone these cells such that in each well you have only one such cell which produces the antibody, then you get the generation of a monoclonal antibody. So monoclonal antibody is nothing but an antibody originating from a single clone of B cells of the same progenitor B cell. I hope this is clear to all of you. So a number of hybridoma antibodies were initially generated by immunizing mice, the animals, and some of these antibodies which were approved for human use, of which one of the first antibodies is OKT3, which is a muromonab CD, and this is a hybridoma-derived monoclonal antibody, first to be approved for human use, which prevents graft rejection by blocking the CD3-mediated T cell activation in the recipient. Okay, so the recipient now does not react to the graft during organ transplantation. Okay. So next, but however, it was seen that when you use such, there is a background, so you all please mute your mics. Yes. So such mouse-derived monoclonals by hybridoma technology were used for therapeutic purposes. However, a significant number of such patients who were administered this monoclonal antibody derived from murine hybridoma developed anti-drug antibody. So what is a drug here? The drug is the mouse antibody. So anti-drug antibody is that in the humans develop antibodies against the mouse antibody. Why is that so? Because if you remember my first slide, wherein I showed you that the antibody is Y-shaped, and in the antibody Y-shaped structure, the lower stem of the antibody, that is the FC portion, that is the fragment crystallizable, binds to the FC receptors. Okay. So if this FC in mouse antibodies, obviously the FC receptor is also from the FC portion of the antibody is also of the mouse origin. So this FC portion of the antibody, one is mouse antibody does not very well bind to the human FC receptors, which are present on effector cells such as macrophages. So the effector functions mediated by such antibodies are not very good. Secondly, these mouse-derived antibodies can be treated as foreign by the humans, and the humans develop antibodies against the paratopes of the mouse antibodies. What are the paratopes? Paratopes are the regions on the variable region of the antibody which bind to the epitope or the antigen. Okay, so there are adverse reactions such as the anti-antibody antibodies which are found in the humans. So therefore, it is not very desirable to use antibodies of mouse source. However, you know that feasibility is not there to immunize humans with such antigens and then use hybridoma technology to generate human antibodies, isn't it? So therefore, one had to resort to murine antibodies by hybridoma. Another prerequisite for a hybridoma technology is the requirement of immunization of the host animal with disease in order to elicit specific monoclonal antibodies, and ethically this is not feasible in humans. So this led to the generation of humanized antibodies. So now we come to the reason why the technology of recombinant antibody development originated, and one could generate chimeric antibodies and humanized antibodies by recombinant DNA technology. So what are the recombinant antibodies? So you must have heard of chimeric antibodies and you must have heard of humanized antibodies. So what is the meaning of these? As I told you, that the FC portion of the mouse antibody may not bind with very good affinity to the FC receptors on the effector cells in the humans, that is the macrophages, NK cells, etc. So therefore, in chimeric antibodies, the constant domains, the constant regions, that is, see, in the variable region, this is variable region of the antibody and this is a constant region, right? So in the variable region also you have the variable domain and a constant one domain of the heavy chain and constant one domain of the light chain, that is a CH1 and CL1, and this is a CH2 and CH3, right? So this is of the heavy chain. So all these constant domains are replaced with human genes encoding for the human C domains. So when you initially raise an antibody in the mouse, then you engineer that mouse antibody such that the genes encoding for the constant domains of the antibody are replaced with human genes. So what is the net effect? You initially immunize the mice and therefore the mouse generated antibody against that antigen with which you immunize the mouse. So you know that which region of the antibody binds to the antigen? It is this particular hypervariable region on the antibody, which is also known as the CDR domains, complementarity determining regions of the antibody in the variable region. So this terminal portion of the variable region is known as a CDR domain. Okay, so only this domain, which is specific for the antigen, is retained of the mouse origin, and the rest of the antibody is now comprised of engineered to have human originated genes which are encoding for the constant domains. So what is the advantage of this kind of a chimeric antibody? That it will have better affinity to the human FC receptors. Reason being that this FC portion of the antibody is now engineered to express only human constant regions. Now, whereas the CDR, the variable, entire variable domain, that is a V region of the heavy chain and the V region of the light chain, are of the non-human source. That is, if it is a mouse antibody, then it is of the mouse origin. So here the variable regions are, variable domains are retained of the mouse and the rest of the antibody is human. So this is a chimeric antibody. Now, what is a humanized antibody? Now, even within the variable domain of the antibody, I told you, only the N-terminal CDR regions, that is, you can see here, shaded by light gray, if you can see those stripes, these are the complementarity determining regions within the variable domain of the antibody. So it is only these CDRs which actually interact with the antigen. So therefore, to further humanize the antibody and have less reactivity or anti-drug antibody developed in the humans when they are immunized with this antibody, what you do is you only retain these CDRs, you engineer into human genes encoding for these CDRs, and the rest of the domains of the antibody are retained, are engineered into the humans. This is clear. Let's see, this is the light chain and this is the heavy chain. So in the mouse, antibody light chain, you have the complementarity determining regions shaded by green. So you have CDR1, 2, and 3 in the light chain, and CDRH1, CDRH2, and CDRH3 in the heavy chain, which are separated by the framework regions 1, 2, 3, 4. This is all present in the variable domain here, within this variable domain. So what you do in a humanized antibody is maximally you humanize it. That is, majority of the engineering is by substituting the mouse genes human genes. So even substitute the framework region genes with human genes. What you leave from the original immunized mouse gene is of the CDR H1, H2, and H3, and CDR L1, L2, and L3. So this is a humanized mouse. So can you tell me which antibody, chimeric antibody or humanized antibody, has minimum regions of the mouse gene?
Okay. Charger 10%
Can you tell me whether the chimeric antibody has minimum mouse gene loci or the humanized antibody has a minimum mouse derived gene loci? It is humanized. Very good. So I'm glad that you understood this. So the WHO has given a common nomenclature which is known as INN subsystem of substem of nomenclature. This is basically nothing but the international non-proprietary name which is given by the WHO to these different source-derived engineered antibodies. So if it's a chimeric antibody, then the name normally carries XI, which is common. For example, abcicimab or rituximab, infliximab. So these are all X. This is an IMAB, isn't it? So these are all chimeric antibodies. Whereas humanized antibodies in their name carry Zumab. So Palivy or say natalizumab. So these are all humanized antibodies. So humanized antibodies are also initially you immunize a non-human, that is a mouse or a rabbit, and you generate the antibody. And when you want to a chimeric antibody, you retain only the variable domain of the antibody from the mouse. Rest constant domains you replace with the human gene loci. Whereas in a humanized antibody, you retain only the CDR regions of the variable domain from the mouse source, and rest you replace with the human encoding genes, right? And if it's a complete human antibody, then it is not a Zumab, but it's a UMAB, that is adalimumab or say ipilimumab and so on. So this is how from the nomenclature or a name of an antibody, you'll come to know what type of an engineered antibody it is, whether it's a chimeric antibody or a mouse antibody. Okay, so next we come to, whenever we talk about antibody engineering, now when you have a whole antibody that is a Y-shaped structure which is comprising of the variable domain and the constant domains, that is the CH1, CH2, and CH3, these are bulky. Why? Because this is bivalent antibody, right? Bivalent means what? It can bind, it has two antigen binding sites. That's why it's a bivalent antibody. So if in a pathogen, if the antigenic region or the epitope recognized by that antibody is conformational and it is deeply embedded within the structure of the antibody and not easily exposed, then what will happen? This bivalent antibody will not be able to access that deeply embedded epitope. So therefore, what you can do is you can also further engineer smaller fragments of these antibodies known as antibody fragments. And which are these antibody fragments? such as, for example, SCFV. What is an SCFV? It is nothing but a short single chain variable fragment comprising of the variable region of the heavy chain and variable region of the light chain linked by a synthetic linker such as a glycine-serine linker. So here, this is retaining only the variable domains of the antibody, and there are no constant domains. Neither they're not even the CH1 of the Fab, isn't it? So therefore, this is a very small fragment, that is SCFV, single chain variable fragment. But still, this particular SCFV is retaining its ability to bind the pathogen by way of its CDR domains. Okay, this is a whole IgG, as you know, we have discussed before, that you have a variable heavy variable domain comprising of VH and VL, and then you have a CH1 domain. Together, the VH, VL, and CH1 and CL, they comprise Fab. And if they are disulfide linked to another Fab, then this whole fragment is known as Fab2. And if you have this alone, then it is a Fab, right? So this is a Fab2, which is retaining a CH1 domain and a CL domain along with the variable domain. So this is a Fab2. Then you have dia antibody, wherein you take from both the chains, both the Y chains, you have the variable region of the heavy and the light chains, again linked by a synthetic link. This is known as a dia body, but this does not have the constant domain which is there in the Fab. This is not there, right? Then you have a single domain antibody, where you take only the region from the variable region of the heavy chain. Okay, this is a single domain antibody. So smaller the antibody fragment, better ability it has to access deeply embedded epitopes. Okay, so then you can have other engineered antibodies such as, say, for example, the SCFV FC domain. So here what you're doing, you're fusing this SCFV, single chain variable fragment, which is comprising of the variable region of the heavy chain, light chain linked by a glycine-serine linker, and you are fusing it with the FC domain of the antibody to give it better stability. Those were the various antibody fragments which can be engineered. So IRV, that is the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, proposed a reverse vaccinology strategy. So normally, what do you understand by a vaccine strategy? That for any pathogen, say for example, how a smallpox is eradicated. So what you do is you give a weakened pathogen or a live attenuated pathogen or heat inactivated pathogen, you immunize an individual and the individual elicits an immune response, or you give a subunit vaccine. Because say, for example, if it's a virus, what you do is you take one protein on the virus envelope and immunize the individual with that particular protein antigen, right? So the individual will elicit antibodies against that particular antigen, which is part of the envelope of the virus. And if that antibody binds, and if it is able to prevent that whole virus from entering another cell, then it's a neutralizing antibody. So what do you mean by reverse vaccinology strategy 2.0, which is proposed by Dennis Burton? Here what you do is you already take an individual who's infected. Like say in this case, if this is an HIV infected individual, that means the individual is already infected with the virus and is already generating antibodies against the virus. So if you take the blood plasma of this individual and test the plasma whether it is carrying neutralizing antibodies. So then what you do is you go, if you take the peripheral blood mononuclear cells from the blood of such an individual and do a B cell sorting, means you specifically sort the B cells. How can you sort a B cell? Using FACS sorter. That is, you use a flow cytometer for phenotyping the B cell, like such as CD9 is a marker for B cell, and a memory B cell marker is CD27. And then using a FACS sorter, fluorescence activated cell sorting machine, which will sort specific B cells only if you give the right fluorescent signals and command to sort only these cells. Then you will be able to sort that particular B cell which these individuals are having. So from these B cells, what you do, you amplify the variable region of the heavy chain and variable region of the light chain of the antibody and generate the monoclonal antibodies. Once you generate the monoclonal antibodies, what you do, you can then see which region of the virus does that antibody bind to. Okay, so by this you identify the epitope on the virus to which that antibody is specifically binding to, and then the sequence of that epitope can be used to design immunogens that are able to elicit broadly neutralizing antibodies. So this is the simple principle behind a reverse vaccinology strategy. So here what you're doing is you're already taking the cue from previously infected individuals who have generated antibodies in their and circulating in their blood plasma, using those, isolating those antibodies, and then seeing which region of the virus epitope that it binds to. Then that epitope is used to design the immunogen. Rather than in a normal vaccine strategy, already you have an immunogen, you immunize an individual, and then the individual produces protective immunity. So is this clear to you, reverse vaccinology strategy? So by this reverse vaccinology strategy, you can generate recombinant IgG, or you can generate antibody fragments such as Fab, or you can generate single chain variable fragments using this reverse vaccinology strategy. So here in our laboratory was mainly focused in generating antibodies against HIV-1 clade C viruses. So why did we want to generate antibodies against clade C viruses is that more than 90% of the HIV infected individuals in India are infected by clade C viruses. So what do you mean by clade of a virus? Clade, or the subtype of the virus, it is basically determined by the specific sequence on that virus. And more than 50% of the viruses infecting globally are clade C viruses. And mostly in Europe and America, it is by clade B viruses. And in Africa and some other parts, you have clade A and other recombinant forms of the virus. So in India, it is predominantly clade B viruses. So in the case of HIV, it has a virus envelope, and within the envelope is present the viral nucleic acid, that is the RNA. So this is an RNA virus, positive strand virus, just like in the case of the COVID virus, isn't it? COVID-19 is also an RNA virus, and there also you have the virus envelope, which has so this HIV envelope, basically, it's trimeric in nature, and on the surface of the envelope, you have basically a number of glycans, that is the glycosylation, which is there on the virus envelope, which shields the virus and prevents it from being attacked by the antibodies. So therefore, and these glycans keep altering on the virus envelope. Therefore, the antibodies which you are generating against this virus has to have very high affinity, or else this antibody will not be able to bind to this virus. So till date, a number of antibodies have been generated against HIV, but very few have been generated against clade C viruses, which can be effective in the Indian population. So briefly, I'll tell you how this virus affects. So I told you this virus envelope comprises of 3 subunits of the GP120 and 3 subunits of the GP41, which interact non-covalently to form a heterodimeric trimer. So this is a trimer, this is a trimer, and when they both interact non-covalently, it forms a heterodimer. Right. So this is the envelope, and this is a virus membrane, and this is GP41, which is embedded into the viral membrane. So when this HIV infects the human cell, it mainly infects the CD4 positive cells. So when it binds to the membrane of the CD4 receptor on the T cells, you can see here, this is a host cell, that is a CD4 positive T cell. And when the GP120 of the virus binds to the CD4 receptor, this leads to a conformational change which exposes the co-receptor binding site. See, this is a co-receptor on the host membrane. So on T cells, the previous speaker mentioned to you about the CCR5, isn't it? Individuals in whom you make a mutant or a knockout of CCR5, such individuals become resistant to HIV. Why? Because the CCR5 on the T cells serves as a co-receptor for the virus. So when the initial binding of the virus to the CD4 on the T cells, there's a conformational change which exposes the co-receptor binding site, and now the virus binds to the co-receptor, that is a CCR5 or CXCR4, and there's a further conformational change which leads to the viral membrane close to the host membrane, and this GP41 domain forming a 6-helix bundle and leading to injection of the viral nucleic acid into the host membrane. So the entire virus doesn't enter inside the infected cell. It is only the RNA which is covered by the nucleocapsid that is injected into the cell, and the virus membrane remains outside the T cells. So this is how a viral infects the host cell. So as I told you, this is a global distribution of the different subtypes of the viruses. In India, you can see red, most 90% of the population infected by clade C. Then you have in the West, that is Europe and the America, it is mainly by clade B viruses. And in the Africa and other parts, you have the circulating recombinant forms in other regions of the world. So there's an estimated 33 million people living with HIV, and which has caused more than 22 million deaths. And HIV-infected individuals in India is approximately 2.1 million, and more than 6,800 new infections occur and over 5,700 deaths each day due to AIDS. So although antiretroviral therapy, that is, you have these HIV drugs which are used nowadays, people are also trying to use some of the antiretroviral drugs which is used for HIV for preventing the severity in COVID-19 infections. You may have heard about, isn't it? So these antiretroviral drugs can decrease the viremia, that is a virus infection in the blood. However, it cannot prevent the infection. Okay, the antiretroviral drugs can only delay the disease progression. Therefore, the need of a potential vaccine. So vaccine can be either therapeutic, such as antibodies can be used, or it can be preventive. Again, antibodies can be used, or you use an immunogen which can elicit, that is active immunization. So passive immunization can be by antibody therapy. So mainly the HIV envelope glycoprotein is a target of the neutralizing antibody. And initially I told you what are neutralizing antibodies. They are antibodies which can bind to the virus and prevent it from infecting another cell. So as you can see here listed, there are a number of antibodies which have been nucleated, which are broadly neutralizing. So here is another term, broadly neutralizing antibodies. So what do you understand by broadly neutralizing antibodies is that such antibodies can neutralize other clades or subtypes of the same virus. Like say, for example, in an HIV clade C infected individual, an antibody is generated. If that antibody is also effective in neutralizing clade B viruses or clade C viruses, then it is known as a broadly neutralizing antibody. It is not very broad, but it is able to cross-neutralize few more strains. Like if, say, for example, a clade C antibody is able to neutralize clade A viruses, then it is known as a cross-neutralizing antibody. So it is desirable to have cross-neutralizing antibodies or broadly neutralizing antibodies. So majority of these antibodies are generated from non-clade C infected individuals, and therefore the need for a subtype C directed antibody. So therefore in our lab, we began research by first testing using the reverse vaccinology strategy. So in the reverse vaccinology strategy, as I explained to you earlier, what we first do is we recruit HIV-infected patients who visit the OPD medicine department or the pediatrics department, and they are known to be HIV infected. So what we do is we take the blood plasma of these patients, pick the blood, draw the blood, separate the plasma by centrifuging the EDTA blood, and then in these plasma antibodies, we check whether has the ability to neutralize the virus. For this, we use a simple luciferase reporter assay. So what we do is, these are basically these TZMBR cells. These are engineered HeLa cells. HeLa cells are basically cervical cancer cells. So these HeLa cells are engineered to express the luciferin gene under the influence of the TAT promoter, that is virus-specific, HIV-specific TAT promoter. So in such a cell, when there is no virus infection, so therefore the virus does not express the TAT protein, which binds to which will bind to the TAT promoter. So then there is no virus, then there is no luminescence. Whereas if there is infection, this virus will enter inside the cell. The virus will express the TAT protein, which activates the TAT promoter. And when the TAT is transcribed, this promoter is activated, the luciferin gene is transcribed and translated, which will give rise to luminescence. So the readout is in a luminometer in terms of relative luminescence units. So if you mix the virus, this is a pseudovirus. I'll come to you in a minute to say what do you mean by pseudovirus. So basically, pseudoviruses are nothing but the viruses which are engineered such that they can infect a cell, but they cannot replicate. So they are replication defective, and therefore they are not biohazardous. So if you for your testing the patient plasma antibodies, if you use live viruses, then it is highly hazardous. And you have to use a lot of biosafety measures. You need a BSL-3 laboratory, isn't it? So therefore, in a simple BSL-2 setup with a P2B hood, you can use pseudoviruses which can infect a cell but cannot replicate. So these are used. So when this virus will enter and infect, it will give luminescence. But if you mix the virus with the plasma and then incubate with these T-ZMBL cells, the plasma contains antibodies from the patients. So if the patient has neutralizing antibodies, I told you that will bind and prevent the virus from infecting the cell. So therefore the virus doesn't enter, so there is a reduction in the luminescence. If the plasma antibody is not very effective in neutralizing, then there will be some amount of infection. Therefore, depending on the relative luminescence units, you can come to know which patient plasma antibodies have neutralizing antibodies activity or not. So this way, the student, Rai Sangrabi, he recruited 80 HIV-infected adult patients from the medicine OPD at AIIMS and also from Safdarjung Hospital, and we extensively characterized against a number of viruses of the different clades. Some of them are clade C viruses, you can see, some of them are B, A, and so on. So we found that out of these 80 individuals, the top 3 neutralizers, the best 3, that means what? Their plasma contain maximum neutralizing antibodies. So here you can see different colors. The red indicates maximum neutralizing activity by the plasma antibodies. The orange one shows relatively moderate neutralizing activity, and the unshaded ones have no neutralizing activity as seen here. So we took the top 3 neutralizers, and then next we wanted to see that in the plasma, there are polyclonal antibodies, that is antibodies which are directed against different epitopes, unlike a monoclonal antibody which is directed against only a single epitope because it is derived from a single clone of B cells of the same B cell progenitor. Okay, so in the blood plasma, it is polyclonal antibodies. So we went on to map the plasma, these 3 plasma antibodies, that which region of the virus envelope do they have antibodies against. So we took all the peptides, short peptides, against the GP120 and GP41 region. And by ELISA, we tested the binding reactivity of these 3 plasma antibodies and found that most of the antibodies were directed against the B3 region and the immunodominant region. So the immunodominant region, according to literature, already is known to elicit non-neutralizing antibodies. So we were not interested in that. So we went on to generate B3 antibodies because you see that all these 3 donors who had good plasma neutralizing activity, the antibodies were directed against the B3 region of the virus envelope. The envelope glycoprotein GP120 has variable regions and constant regions, and therefore it is known as B1 to B5 and C1 to C5. Okay, this is the GP120. And then the transmembrane domain is a GP41. So we went on to isolate anti-V3 monoclonal antibodies from these 3 HIV-infected donors. So similarly, we identified more HIV-infected patients, 33 patients, and the total number of peripheral blood mononuclear cells that we isolated from them was 321 million cells. And when we then plated these cells and then tested their reactivity for the V3 peptide, which was fused to cholerotoxin B subunit so that the peptide remains conformational, so that we pick up the conformational antibodies, and binding ELISAs were done. And then out of these, when the number of samples which reached the hybridoma fusion stage were only 25. So you can imagine we started with 321 million PBMCs. We got only 25 samples which reached the hybridoma fusion stage. Then only out of that, the ones which were successfully cloned in the hybridoma were 15. And ultimately, the monoclonal antibodies that we got from these hybridomas were only 3. Understand that by this technology is so cumbersome. And what you do in the process while you're screening and doing clonal dilution, you lose a number of clones. And therefore, maybe some of the good neutralizers you lose in these steps. And in the end, you will manage to get only 3 antibodies. Of these 3 antibodies, one of the antibodies, 904, was cross-reactive, and we got a patent for this antibody. And it was, able to cross-neutralize the viruses. So next, because the hybridoma technology is very cumbersome, and you may lose some of the good neutralizing clones during the different stages of the hybridoma technology. Therefore, it is better to to adopt a more efficient technique for antibody generation, which is known as the recombinant antibody technology. And one of the technology is Phage display, construction of the Phage display library. So in our laboratory, we constructed an SCFV library. SCFV, I already explained to you what it is. It is a variable region of the heavy chain and variable region of the light chain linked via synthetic linker, that is a glycine serine linker. And this SCFV fragment is the gene encoding for this SCFV is fused to a Phage coat protein 3. So basically, what is a phage? Phage is nothing but a virus, right? And the phage which infects a bacterium is known as a bacteriophage, right? So here, let's say, for example, this is the M13 filamentous phage. So the phage mainly contains a circular single-stranded DNA, which is encoding for the phage coat proteins. That is the coat protein 3 and the coat protein 8. So this coat protein 8 is important, it's structural. The coat protein 3 is not so important for the phage function, and therefore the SCFV gene is fused with the gene which is going to encode for the coat protein 3. Okay, and this way we construct a phage library which is going to express on its surface the SCFV molecules of our interest. So this is the procedure. So what we did is, in the normal case, when you construct an SCFV library, it can be from a naive individual. So naive individuals mean what? Healthy individuals like you or me, who have not been exposed to any pathogen or infection. In the peripheral blood mononuclear cells of a healthy donor, and from these cells, you isolate the RNA, total RNA, and then using primers specific for the variable region and the light variable region of the heavy chain and variable region of the light chain, you amplify these genes, link by a glycine serine linker, and this is already present in the primers which are using for amplifying these genes, and then you do a ligation with the phage vector, and that's how you construct a SCFV library. So in our laboratory, what we did is, because we had already used the hybridoma technology to generate anti-V3 antibodies, so in the hybridoma technology, the first step, what you do is you take the peripheral blood mononuclear cells and you immortalize them with Epstein-Barr virus. So we already had EBV transformed B cells, okay, and which were V3 selected. That is, we checked those EBV transformed B cells, those which secreted the V3 antibodies were the ones which were selected. So what we did in our modified methodology for phage displayed generation of SCFVs library was, we took the EBV transformed B cells, these EBV transformed peripheral blood mononuclear cells were taken from a 96 well plate, and then those which showed positive reactivity shown in red for the V3, those cells were pooled and taken into a culture flask and allowed to grow. And then what we did was, from these EBV transformed B cells, we isolated the total, because these were only reactive to V3 antigen of the viral envelope. So then we isolated the RNA, reverse transcribed to the cDNA. And from this, using primers specific for the variable region of the heavy chain and variable region of the light chain, we amplified these two gene fragments. And then these primers also carried the glycine serine linker. And then what we did was a assembly PCR. So when we did the assembly PCR, now we had the entire scFv construct, that is the variable region of the heavy chain and variable region of the light chain, linked by the glycine serine linker, and which had the potential cells. So using this scFv construct, we cloned this construct into a phage-mate vector. So what do you understand by a phage-mate vector? Normally what we do is a plasmid which is used for transformation in the bacteria, right? For transforming any gene into a bacteria. But a phage-mate vector basically is able to express the phage proteins, right? And also it retains the antibody selection gene and the promoter which is present in the plasmid. So this phage-mate vector was, this gene scFv was cloned into the phage-mate vector. Is this clear? Do you need any detail on the phage-mate vector? Are you clear with the phage-mates? Yes. So by this technology, we constructed a V3 pre-selected anti-HIV human recombinant scFv library comprising of 7,000 clones. So once again, to summarize, we took the ABV transformed V3 pre-selected PBMCs from an HIV-infected donor whose plasma showed potent neutralizing antibodies against HIV. Then isolated the RNA, synthesized the cDNA, amplified the variable region of the heavy and light chains, linked by a glycine serine linker, and constructed the scFv. This scFv was cloned into the phage-mate vector and transformed into E. coli. So here there was amplification, the scFv, and then basically we did biopanning. So what do you understand by biopanning? So what we do is, normally this phage-mate vector, it has all the genes by which the phage particles can replicate, but it does not have the packaging signal which can package it into a phage and which is viable, right? And which can be secreted, phage particle which can be secreted. So therefore what you do is you rescue this phage using a helper phage. So when you add the helper phage to this E. coli, so basically it has the packaging signal and it will package the phage-mate vector along with your scFv into the phage particle. And then on the surface of the phage particle, you have your scFv which is expressed. So then now you want to see that whatever scFv has been expressed from the phage particle, is it specific against the antigen of your interest? Because scFv is the antibody fragment. So you want to pick up only those phages which are expressing antibodies against V3. So for this, what you do, we plate, in the ELISA plate, we coat V3 peptide, and then we pour the phages onto the wells of the ELISA plate, and those phages which express a scFv specific for the antigen will bind, and the unbound phages will get washed out. And then we dilute this bound phage by changing the pH of the buffer, and again use it to infect E. coli and then amplify. So this way, what you do, again we do multiple 3 to 4 rounds of biopanning. So what is the purpose of this biopanning? To enrich the phage clones which are expressing the scFv of your interest along with their code protein 3. Okay, so using this novel strategy, we generated 3 scFv monoclonals which were able to neutralize relatively neutralization sensitive viruses, but they were not very effective against resistance viruses. But this was a modified strategy because we did not use just the healthy PBMCs, but we used EBV transformed antigen pre-selected B cells, EBV transformed B cells, for generating such a phage library to construct the scFv library of about 7,000 clones. So although there are just 7,000 clones, it is already antigen pre-selected. That means majority of these clones are directed against V3 region. So this is an antigen selected library. And how do you come to know that indeed these scFvs are specific to your antigen or not? So basically what you do is you solubilize the SCFV expressed by these phages. So how do you solubilize the protein SCFV? So basically what you do is that normally the phage expresses your SCFV on the surface along with the coat protein 3, right? So then this phage is used to infect another cell, which is a bacterial cell, that is the HB2151. So this is another non-suppressor strain of the bacterium. So why is this different clone? Initially, infected into TG1 E. coli cells, and this is HB21 cells, bacterial cells, which you infected. The reason is that the phage vector also carries an amber stop codon, and this stop codon is usually localized in between your SCFV and the coat protein 3. So when you infect in the normal TG1 cells, COM cells, so those are suppressor mutation. Amber is a suppressor mutation for that cell line, and therefore there is no cleavage at the stop. Means there is no termination of the protein expression at that stop codon. Right, the protein continues to be expressed, and the coat protein 3 along with the SCFE is expressed together and expressed on the surface of the phage. But the moment you inoculate the HB2151 cells, which is a non-suppressor mutation, so this stop codon is read as a stop codon during translation, and therefore the moment the SCFE is expressed, the coat protein 3 is not expressed, and the SCFE is released from the phage, and that's how you can solubilize the phage and purify it and sequence to be sure that the SCFE is of your antibody of interest. So this was published in BMC Biotechnology, and Professor Subrata Sinha, currently the head of our department in AIIMS, was the scientist in whose lab they used to do recombinant antibody technology by construction of phage libraries, and there was technology transfer to our laboratory by the student Rajesh, who first time constructed this SCFV library. So later we went on to generate PBMC-based library from adult HIV-infected patients by the similar strategy. And here, because we took peripheral blood mononuclear cells from a large number of donors, we constructed a library of an unselected library, because this was all the peripheral blood mononuclear cells from whom we isolated the cDNA synthesis. In the previous library, we took only those EBV transformed B cells which were reactive to the V3 antigen. So that was an antigen selected library. So this was an unselected library of a large diversity of 10 to the power 9 clones. So this is showing you how the antibody fragments are expressed on the gene 3 minor coat protein of the phage. So then we went on to do the phage ELISA, wherein we coat the ELISA plates with the antigen against which we want to see whether the antibodies are specifically binding or not. So in this case, it was GP120 of the virus, and this was a trimeric protein, BG505 GP140. So we tested all our SCFE monoclonals by binding ELISA and also using DSA and other mixture of polypeptides as negative controls. And we found specific clones which were high binders. And those clones were then, 3 of these clones were tested for the neutralizing activity by the same luciferase reporter assay as I had described before. And we found that this was the most potent clone, the D11, as you can see, and it neutralized 63% of the subtype C Indian viruses. And this was published by in 2017. And this work was mainly done by my PhD student, Lubina Khan, and assisted by Rajesh and Dr. Ramchandran, who was also an MD student at that time. So this is the advantage of recombinant phage technology, that you can get a large diversity of antibody clones. And another advantage is, from this large diversity of antibody clones, depending on which antigen you used to select and pick out the antibody, you can get antibodies of diverse specificities you can pick up, isn't it? And such antibodies can be used for therapeutic applications. So the current FDA-approved phage display derived antibodies that are used for human purposes, for examples are, say, adalimumab, which is Humira, and this is targeting human necrosis factor alpha and used in inflammatory conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, colitis, psoriatic arthritis, etc. There are other antibodies also which are used for other purposes, and these are all Phage library derived antibodies. So, so far we had, generated antibodies again from adult HIV infected donors, and later my PhD student Muzammil, he characterized the plasma of HIV infected children and found that and constructed viruses from these children, infected children, the primary isolates of clade C viruses, and found that majority of these viruses were not neutralized by the already provided antibodies which are present globally. So only 4 antibodies were effective in neutralizing these pediatric viruses, whereas all the other antibodies were less effective in neutralizing these viruses. And therefore, we realized that it is important to generate antibodies from these HIV infected children, which will be effective against these HIV infected viruses in these children. And these were a number of papers wherein we found that yes, children also develop cross-neutralizing antibodies that evolve with time. So we followed up these children who visit the pediatric OPD at AIIMS and identified against which region these plasma antibodies are directed, against which region of the viruses. So after extensive characterization, we tested the neutralizing potential of the plasma antibodies from these children against the different subtypes of the viruses. And we found 2 donors, 329 and 330, you can see, which were had very high antibody titers of ID50 more than 6,000. So we went on to generate an anti-human SCFV library from such 9 chronically HIV infected children whose plasma were able to neutralize the viruses very effectively. And by the same technology, my student Sanjeev Kumar, he generated an SCFV library, and again we did a biopanning, tested in the ELISA binding, and by competitive ELISA with other known broadly neutralizing antibodies, we identified that these SCFV monoclonals that we generated from this pediatric library were CD4 binding site directed. So this is the major receptor for the virus entry. And this antibody 2B10, it showed very good breadth. That is, it was effective against diverse clades of the viruses, not only clade C, but also other viruses, with a 77% breadth and geometric mean titer of 17.9 microgram per ml. Okay, so and this was published in Frontiers in Immunology in 2017, and most of this work was carried out by Sanjeev Kumar, my PhD student. So, so in the meanwhile, it was observed from vaccine trials that CD4 binding site is a promising region for vaccine design. And another drug, which is ibalizumab, this is basically a chimeric antibody and received FDA approval. Basically, this antibody binds to the virus after the virus is bound to the CD4 receptor. And then once it binds, it prevents fusion of this viral membrane to the host T cells. And therefore, this is also used for, approved for human use. This is a recombinant antibody. This was used for human use in mainly those patients who were severely infected and did not respond to most of the antiretroviral drugs. What is the advantage of engineering such antibodies? So not only chimeric antibodies or humanized antibodies can be engineered, but you can also further mutate these by changing certain gene sequences and construct bispecific antibodies. So what are bispecific antibodies? So what you do is, here you have one antibody. Here you see the variable region is light pink, and this is a heavy chain variable region, which is red, right? So what you do is, you swap the CH1 domain and the light domain of the constant region. So can you see now, what we have done is, here you have that you have interchanged between the light chain constant and the heavy chain constant. You have interchanged it, isn't it? And also the variable domain of the heavy and the light chain. So this way you've constructed a bispecific antibody. And so basically in a bispecific antibody, what you did, this was the first antibody where you swapped the domains. This is another antibody which again you have swapped the domains. And what you did is you took one variable region of the heavy and the light chain, and one antibody you have the variable region of the heavy and light chain of the second antibody. So these two arms of each Y-shaped arm of the Y-shaped antibody is recognizing different antigens. So therefore, this is bispecific. So it can recognize two different antigens. Okay, and here another point mutation was inserted in the CH3 domain of the heavy chain for heterodimerization of this antibody, because these are two different, isn't it, monomers. So then further to improve the binding of this antibody to an antigen, so an antibody, if it has to bind to a conformational epitope, the antibody has to be flexible. So this is a hinge region of the antibody. You can see this hinge region here in IgG1 is very small, whereas in IgG3 it is very large. So basically, this hinge region of this antibody was also replaced and made into a IgG3 isotype of the bispecific antibody. So it was seen that a CD4 binding site directed antibody 3BNC117 along with PGT135, which is a V3 directed antibody. So when you made a bispecific antibody of these two specificities or recognizing two different regions on the virus envelope, this demonstrated synergetic, enhanced in vivo protective activity in HIV-1 infected humanized mice. So what are humanized mice? Now, I will briefly explain to you what do we understand by humanized mice. See, whenever the major hurdle in testing the antibodies which are elicited against HIV is that you want to see whether that blocks infection, isn't it? And it is seen that HIV cannot infect mice. So obviously you cannot infect the mouse with HIV, and therefore you cannot test the antibody whether it is preventing the infection in the mice. Okay, and it is very expensive to carry out studies in primate models such as monkeys and chimpanzees, which are used for HIV vaccine studies. So therefore, humanized mice were engineered. So these humanized mice, basically, they are engineered to carry the loci for the human genes which encode for the CD4 receptor. Okay, so therefore, what happens in these mice, the T cells, they don't, and then you knock out the mouse CD4 gene encoding for the mouse CD4. So now these mice express T cells whose CD4 is of the human origin. Therefore, they are known as humanized mice. So the moment these mice carry T cells with human CD4, then the HIV can infect these T cells, and then you can see by mixing the virus with the antibody whether it is blocking the infection in humanized mice. So this is how bispecific antibodies show better protective effectivity, because bispecific means it can target two different epitopes on the same antigen. Then recently, so these are all basically by engineering and fast display technology that you generate these kind of antibody fragments. So recently in our lab, so I told you that you cannot immunize humans with the infection, isn't it, to get the spleen and generate the hybridoma or the recombinant antibody. So in humans, you cannot even infect so that you can get the PBMCs from the and the B cells for constructing a phage library. So if you want to generate human antibodies, then what you do is you can take HIV-infected donors whose plasma antibodies show good neutralizing activity, and then you sort the B cells of such specific. I told you this donor showed very good neutralizing activity. So what we did was by FACS sorter, that is the fluorescence activated cell sorter, we sorted basically the CD19 positive B cells and IgG positive B cells, and amongst those IgG positive B cells, we further sorted only HIV specific B cells. These were the HIV specific B cells because this is the HIV antigen which is also used in sorting only HIV specific B cells. So from this HIV infected donor, we sorted the B cells. So what is the advantage of generating such human antibodies? The advantage is that it is completely human antibody and it is not engineered, and therefore both the heavy and the light chains are originating from the same B cell. So such antibodies are highly functional and very effective. That is one disadvantage of the FAST library. Reason being, those are artificially combined variable region of the heavy chain and the light chain. They may be from random, isn't it, from different B cells. So, but from a human B cell, you get basically functional antibody of a single originated B cell. So by taking these B cells, which are HIV specific from an HIV infected donor, then we went on to construct the whole antibody by amplifying the heavy chain and light chain and expressing it, cloning into a vector which contains the FC portion, human FC, and constructed the whole human antibody, recombinant antibody. And this antibody was tested for binding to the HIV antigens and showed good binding reactivity and showed excellent neutralizing activity with 67% neutralization potential against a number of viruses which were tested here. And these were all tier 2 and tier 3 viruses also. That means this antibody was effective in neutralizing even very resistant viruses also. So then we went on to check the affinity of this antibody by SPR, surface plasmon resonance. And we found that the antibody demonstrated about 5 into 10 to the power minus 8 molar. That means it was almost in nanomolar. KD was almost in nanomolar quantity activity. And this antibody not only neutralized the autologous contemporaneous virus, but also evolving viruses at a later time points. That's why it was a very effective virus antibody. And further we did epitope mapping and found that this is a V3 glycan targeted antibody. And later by competitive ELISA, we confirmed that it is an N332 epitope specific antibody from this donor. And this was published in Journal of Biology. So this is to summarize how this antibody we isolated from this HIV-infected pediatric donor. We took the peripheral blood mononuclear cells from this donor. Then we did antigen-specific single B cell sorting using FACS and HIV-specific B cells. From these B cells, we amplified the from each B cell, because each B cell gets single B cell sorting, this is mind you, and therefore from each single B cell, we amplified the heavy and the light chain of the antibody, and therefore this is a functional antibody that we got. And then we sequenced the heavy and light chain genes and cloned into an expression vector which carried the FC, and we expressed the whole antibody, tested for its binding affinity and neutralizing activity, and did a structural analysis by doing a negative stain EM at Institute of Science in Bangalore. And finally, we showed that this antibody was V3 directed. So this antibody is again patented. And this entire work would have been impossible without my dedicated PhD students and collaborators and the funding agencies, Department of Biotechnology, DST, ICMR, and SERP. Thank you very much.